The morning sun painted the coastal town of Puerto Sereno in shades of gold and amber, but Natalia Moreno could only see darkness ahead. She stood in the tiny bathroom of her childhood home, staring at her reflection in the cracked mirror. Today was supposed to be impossible. Today, she would marry a man she had never loved, a man who looked at her as if she were nothing more than a business transaction written in flesh and blood. 26 years old, with warm brown eyes that reflected her gentle spirit and dark hair that cascaded down her back in natural waves, Natalia had always believed in love. She had devoted her life to healing wounded animals at the local veterinary clinic, finding joy in the unconditional affection of creatures who asked for nothing but kindness. She had dreamed of marrying someone who would look at her the way she looked at the world, with wonder and tenderness. But dreams, like the delicate shells scattered along Puerto Sereno's beaches, could be crushed under the weight of reality. 3 months ago, her younger brother Javier had collapsed during his university finals. The diagnosis came swift and merciless: acute leukemia. The treatment would cost more than their family could earn in 10 lifetimes. Her father, a retired fisherman with arthritis, had already mortgaged their home. Her mother worked 3 jobs, her hands raw from cleaning houses. Still, it was not enough. The medical bills piled higher each week, a mountain of debt that threatened to bury them all. Natalia had exhausted every option. She had begged banks for loans, pleaded with charitable organizations, and sold everything she owned of value. Nothing made a difference. Javier's condition worsened. The hospital threatened to stop his treatment. She watched her baby brother, barely 21 years old, fade a little more each day, his once bright smile becoming a shadow of itself. Then Silas Thornton entered her life like a winter storm. She had never met him before his driver arrived at her clinic one gray Tuesday afternoon. The message was simple and cold. Mr. Thornton wished to speak with her about her family's financial situation. He would see her at his downtown office at precisely 4 o'clock. Refusal was not an option. Silas Thornton owned half the industrial sector in their region. His steel manufacturing empire stretched across 3 countries. At 34, he was among the wealthiest men in the nation, known equally for his business brilliance and his ruthless reputation. People spoke his name in whispers, mixing respect with fear. When Natalia entered his office that afternoon, she found a man carved from ice. Tall and broad-shouldered, with sharp features that might have been handsome if not for the perpetual coldness in his steel-gray eyes. His dark hair was swept back with precision. Everything about him spoke of control, calculation, and complete emotional detachment. He barely looked up from his paperwork when she entered. When he finally acknowledged her presence, his gaze swept over her with the interest one might show a piece of furniture being considered for purchase. "Miss Moreno," his voice was deep, emotionless. "I have acquired your family's debts. All of them. The hospital bills, the mortgage, the credit cards. Everything." Natalia's heart stopped. "Why would you do that?" "Because I need something from you." He leaned back in his leather chair, studying her with those unreadable eyes. "I need a wife." The words hung in the air between them like poison. Natalia felt the floor shift beneath her feet. "I don't understand." "It's quite simple. My board of directors believes a married man projects stability. My investors want assurance that I'm committed to legacy building. A wife serves that purpose." He spoke as if discussing a merger, not a marriage. "You will marry me. In exchange, I will ensure your brother receives the best medical care available. Your family's debts will be erased. Your parents will live comfortably for the rest of their lives. And if I refuse?" His smile was cruel. "Then the hospitals will stop treatment by Friday. Your home will be foreclosed by the end of the month. Your brother will die, and your family will spend the next 20 years drowning in debt. But please, do refuse. I can always find another candidate." Natalia wanted to throw his offer back in his face. She wanted to tell him that people were not commodities, that marriage was sacred, that she would rather starve than sell herself. But then she thought of Javier's pale face, his weak voice asking if he would ever get better. She thought of her mother's tears, her father's defeated shoulders. She signed the contract that same afternoon. The wedding took place 6 weeks later in the cathedral where her parents had married 30 years before. But where their ceremony had been filled with love and joy, hers was a hollow spectacle. The cathedral overflowed with white roses and crystal chandeliers, hundreds of guests in designer clothes who whispered behind gloved hands about the mysterious bride. Natalia walked down the aisle alone. Her father had refused to give her away to a man who had bought her like property, though his heart was breaking with guilt. Her wedding dress cost more than her family's annual income, a creation of silk and lace that felt like a beautiful prison. Each step toward the altar felt like walking toward her own execution. Silas waited at the altar, devastatingly handsome in his black tuxedo, his expression as warm as a granite statue. When she reached him, he did not offer his hand. He did not smile. He simply stared ahead, counting the minutes until this performance would end. The priest's words washed over her in a blur. She heard herself recite vows that meant nothing, promising to love and cherish a man who had made it clear she was merely a purchased asset. When the priest announced they were husband and wife, Silas turned to her with mechanical precision. His kiss was brief, cold, and utterly devoid of feeling. His lips barely touched hers before he pulled away, as if the contact disgusted him. The guests applauded. Cameras flashed. No one saw the death of hope in Natalia's eyes. The reception was torture. She sat beside Silas at the head table while he conducted business conversations, completely ignoring her existence. Important men came to offer congratulations. Beautiful women looked at her with undisguised curiosity and pity. She was the girl from nowhere who had somehow trapped Silas Thornton, or so they believed. Hours later, a limousine delivered them to the Thornton estate, a massive modern mansion of glass and steel perched on a cliff overlooking the ocean. The irony was not lost on Natalia. She could see her hometown's lights twinkling in the distance, so close yet impossibly far away. The master suite was enormous, decorated in cold grays and blacks. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed the dark ocean beyond. Natalia stood in the center of the room, her heart pounding, dreading what would come next. Silas removed his jacket and poured himself scotch from a crystal decanter. He drank deeply, his back to her. The silence stretched until Natalia thought she might scream just to break it. Finally, he turned. His eyes raked over her with an expression of pure contempt. "Let me make something clear," his voice cut through the silence like a blade. "This marriage is a business arrangement. Nothing more. You are here because you serve a purpose. You will attend social functions when required. You will smile for cameras. You will play the role of devoted wife in public." He took another drink, his jaw clenched. "But in private, you are nothing to me. The idea of touching you, of sharing intimacy with someone who sold herself for money, makes my skin crawl. You disgust me." Each word was a physical blow. Natalia felt tears burning behind her eyes but refused to let them fall. She would not give him the satisfaction of seeing her break. Silas gestured toward the enormous bed. "I will sleep there. You will sleep on the floor beside the door. That is where you belong. Do not speak unless spoken to. Do not cry. Your self-pity irritates me. Remember what you are. A purchased convenience. A necessary evil." He turned away, dismissing her, and began preparing for bed as if she had already ceased to exist. Natalia stood frozen, her wedding dress suddenly feeling like chains. This was her life now. This beautiful prison, this man of ice who had bought her body but would never touch it, who owned her future but despised her present. With trembling hands, she gathered a thin blanket from the closet. The marble floor was cold against her skin as she curled up near the door, as far from the bed as possible. Through the windows, she could see the stars above the ocean, the same stars that shone over her family's home, over Javier's hospital room. She had saved them. But in doing so, she had condemned herself. As Silas's breathing deepened into sleep, Natalia finally allowed her tears to fall, silent and bitter. She cried for her lost dreams, for the love she would never know, for the girl she had been that morning who still believed in fairy tales. Tomorrow, she would be strong. Tomorrow, she would find a way to survive this. But tonight, on the cold floor of her wedding night, Natalia Moreno mourned the death of hope and the birth of a life sentence she could never escape. The first month in the Thornton mansion taught Natalia the true meaning of loneliness. She had expected coldness from Silas, but she had not anticipated the crushing isolation that came with being invisible in your own home. The mansion was a sprawling monument to wealth and emptiness, with 30 rooms that echoed with silence and staff members who treated her with polite distance, unsure of her actual status in the household. Silas kept his word with brutal efficiency. He left before dawn each morning, his departure marked only by the sound of his car engine fading down the driveway. He returned late at night, often past midnight, going directly to his study or the master bedroom without acknowledging her presence. On the rare occasions their paths crossed in the hallways, he would look through her as if she were made of glass, transparent and unworthy of notice. Natalia created routines to survive. She woke early, walked the estate grounds, and ate breakfast alone in the vast dining room while staff members moved around her like ghosts. The head housekeeper, Mrs. Vega, was a stern woman in her 50s who ran the household with military precision but showed Natalia neither warmth nor hostility, only professional courtesy. During one of her morning walks, Natalia discovered the kennels at the far edge of the property, hidden behind a line of cypress trees. The structures were old, clearly neglected for years, but inside she found 3 dogs in various states of distress. There was Bruno, an aging German shepherd with a limp and sad eyes. Luna, a nervous mixed breed who cowered at any sudden movement. And Titan, a massive Rottweiler who growled at everyone but whose eyes held more fear than aggression. When Natalia asked Mrs. Vega about the animals, the housekeeper's expression softened for the first time. They belonged to Mr. Thornton's mother, God rest her soul. She rescued strays, gave them a home here. After she passed 5 years ago, Mr. Thornton couldn't bring himself to rehome them, but he also couldn't bear to see them. He pays a handler to feed them, but otherwise, they're forgotten. Natalia felt her heart break for these abandoned creatures. She began spending her afternoons in the kennels, using her veterinary skills to examine and treat them. Bruno's limp came from an old injury that had healed poorly. With gentle therapy and patience, she helped him walk with less pain. Luna had been abused before her rescue and needed slow, careful trust building. Titan's aggression masked a deep fear of abandonment. She talked to them for hours, finding in their company the connection she lacked with humans. They did not judge her. They did not see her as a purchased bride or a social climber. They simply accepted her love and returned it unconditionally. What Natalia did not know was that Silas watched her sometimes from his study window. His office overlooked the kennels, and during rare moments when he looked up from his endless work, he would see her kneeling in the dirt, her arms around Bruno's neck, or sitting quietly while Luna slowly approached her, or laughing as Titan finally accepted a treat from her hand. Something about those images disturbed him in ways he refused to examine. She looked genuinely happy there, genuinely herself, without pretense or calculation. It contradicted everything he had decided about her, and he hated contradictions. Silas Thornton had not always been made of ice. Once, years ago, he had been capable of warmth, of trust, of love. Her name had been Camila Reyes, and she had been his entire world. They had met during his university years, before the full weight of the Thornton empire had fallen on his shoulders. She had been a literature student with bright eyes and a laugh that could light up any room. He had loved her with the passion of youth, believing their connection was unbreakable. He had proposed after graduation, offering her a ring and his heart. She had said yes with tears of joy. For 6 months, he had walked on air, planning their future, building dreams. Then his father had died suddenly, and Silas had inherited everything: the company, the wealth, the responsibility, and the burden. That was when Camilla's mask had slipped. She began making demands. The wedding needed to be bigger, more extravagant. She needed a larger ring, a more impressive venue. She complained that he worked too much, yet spent his money freely on designer clothes and expensive trips. Her friends whispered that she had finally hit the jackpot, that she was smart to secure her future. The final blow came when Silas discovered she had been cheating on him with one of his business rivals, a married man twice her age who had promised to leave his wife for her. When Silas confronted her, Camilla had not even tried to deny it. "You're always working," she had said with a shrug. "What did you expect?" "I have needs, Silas. Besides, you were never really present, even when you were there. At least Victor pays attention to me." But it was her parting words that had truly destroyed him. "I never loved you. I loved what you could give me. There's a difference." That night, something inside Silas had frozen solid. He had built walls around his heart so thick that nothing could penetrate them. He had vowed never to be vulnerable again, never to trust, never to believe in the illusion of love. Women wanted money and status. That was all. Romance was a fairy tale told to fools. When his board had pressured him to marry for appearances, he had decided to do it on his own terms. He would choose someone who had no illusions about love, someone who knew exactly what the transaction entailed. When his investigators had brought him information about Natalia Moreno and her desperate family situation, he had seen the perfect solution. She would marry him for money. He would never have to pretend it was anything more. But watching her now, seeing her gentleness with his mother's forgotten dogs, seeing her find joy in simple things despite her circumstances, created uncomfortable cracks in his carefully constructed worldview. One afternoon, Silas came home early due to a cancelled meeting. He headed toward his study but paused when he heard singing coming from the east wing. Following the sound, he discovered Natalia in his late mother's conservatory, a glass-enclosed garden room that had been locked since her death. Somehow, Natalia had found the key. She had cleaned the space, removing years of dust and neglect. The dead plants had been cleared away, and she was now carefully tending to a few survivors she had coaxed back to life. She wore simple jeans and a cotton shirt, her hair pulled back in a messy bun, dirt under her fingernails. She was singing softly in Spanish, an old folk song his mother used to hum. Silas felt an unexpected tightness in his chest. This room had been his mother's sanctuary, her place of peace. He had locked it away because the memories were too painful. Yet here was this woman, this stranger, bringing it back to life. "What are you doing here?" His voice came out harsher than intended, making Natalia jump and turn, her eyes wide. "I'm sorry," she said quickly, her hands trembling slightly. "I found the conservatory while exploring. It seemed wrong to leave it abandoned. Your mother clearly loved this place. I thought I could restore it. You had no right." Silas stepped into the room, his jaw clenched. "This room is private. Everything in this house is mine, including your time and your activities. You do not make decisions without permission." Natalia's eyes flashed with something he had not seen before. Anger. "I am your wife, not your prisoner. Or am I wrong about that? You are whatever I say you are." Silas moved closer, using his height to intimidate her. "You are here because I purchased your compliance. Do not forget that." "I have not forgotten for a single moment." Natalia stood her ground despite her obvious nervousness. "You remind me every day with your silence, your contempt, your complete disregard for my humanity. But I will not apologize for trying to find something beautiful in this prison you have built around both of us." Her words struck deeper than she knew. Before Silas could respond, his phone rang. It was his assistant with an urgent matter. He gave Natalia one final cold look and left, but her words echoed in his mind for hours afterward. That evening, Silas was required to attend a charity gala, one of the social obligations that necessitated having a wife. It was Natalia's first public appearance since the wedding. Mrs. Vega helped her prepare, providing a stunning emerald gown that complemented her coloring perfectly. When Natalia descended the stairs, Silas was waiting in the foyer. For a moment, just a moment, something flickered in his eyes as he looked at her. But it vanished so quickly Natalia thought she had imagined it. The gala was held at the city's most prestigious hotel. Hundreds of wealthy donors mingled in a glittering ballroom, champagne flowing freely. Silas introduced Natalia to various business associates and society figures, his hand at the small of her back, playing the attentive husband perfectly. It was all performance, and they both knew it. Then she appeared. Camila Reyes, now Camila Davison after marrying the man she had left Silas for. She looked stunning in a red dress, her beauty polished and predatory. When she spotted Silas, her eyes lit with malicious interest. "Silas," she purred, gliding over with her husband trailing behind. "How wonderful to see you. And this must be your new wife. How charming." Natalia felt Silas tense beside her, his hand tightening almost painfully at her waist. She looked up and saw something she had never seen in his face before. Pain. Raw, unguarded pain that he quickly masked, but not before she glimpsed the wound beneath his armor. "Camila," Silas said flatly. "I see marriage agrees with you." Camila laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Oh, you know me. I always land on my feet. Though I must say, I was surprised to hear you had married. I thought you swore off relationships after we ended things." She turned to Natalia with false sweetness. "Did he tell you about us? We were quite serious once." Before Natalia could respond, Silas cut in. "Ancient history. Not worth discussing. Ancient history that taught you valuable lessons, I hope," Camila said, her smile sharp. "After all, we both know what really matters in the end, don't we?" She walked away, leaving tension thick in the air. Silas's expression had returned to its usual coldness, but Natalia had seen behind the mask. She understood now. His cruelty was not innate. It was armor. He had been hurt, betrayed, and he had decided never to be vulnerable again. The revelation changed something in Natalia. She still hated her situation, still felt the daily pain of his rejection. But now she saw him not as a monster, but as a wounded man who had chosen ice over the risk of fire. They rode home in silence. When they reached the mansion, Silas went directly to his study and poured himself a drink. Natalia paused at the door. "She hurt you," Natalia said softly. "Whoever she was to you, she hurt you badly." Silas's hand froze on the glass. "Do not presume to understand me. I don't presume anything. I am simply observing what is obvious to anyone who looks closely enough." Natalia stepped into the room. "You punish me for her sins. You treat me with contempt because you are afraid. I am afraid of nothing." His voice was ice. "You are afraid of everything," Natalia countered, her own voice growing stronger. "You are afraid to trust, afraid to feel, afraid to be human. So you hide behind your wealth and your coldness and your cruelty. But it has not made you strong, Silas. It has made you empty." He turned on her, his eyes blazing. "You know nothing about me, about what I have endured, about the reasons I am the way I am." "Then tell me," Natalia challenged. "Tell me why you hate so easily and trust so little. Tell me why you bought a wife instead of finding love. Tell me why you sleep in a bed while I sleep on the floor, when we both know the real reason has nothing to do with me and everything to do with your fear of letting anyone close enough to hurt you again." The silence that followed was deafening. Silas stared at her, his chest rising and falling rapidly, emotions warring across his face. For a moment, Natalia thought he might actually answer, might actually let her see the man beneath the armor. But then the walls slammed back into place. "Get out," he said quietly, dangerously. "Get out before I say something we will both regret." Natalia held his gaze a moment longer, then turned and left. But as she walked to her lonely room, she realized something had shifted between them. The ice was cracking. The question was whether anything living could grow in the frozen ground beneath, or whether they were both destined to remain trapped in this beautiful, terrible prison of his making. The days following the gala brought an unexpected change to the Thornton mansion. Silas did not become warmer, but his coldness had shifted into something else entirely. He watched Natalia now, his gray eyes following her movements when he thought she was not looking. The silence between them felt heavier, charged with unspoken words and suppressed emotions that neither dared to acknowledge. Natalia continued her work with the dogs, finding peace in their uncomplicated affection. Bruno could now walk almost normally, his tail wagging whenever she appeared. Luna had transformed from a cowering creature into a playful companion who brought her toys and waited eagerly for their afternoon sessions. Even Titan had softened, allowing Natalia to brush his thick coat while he leaned against her with contented rumbles. Mrs. Vega had begun warming to Natalia as well, occasionally sharing stories about the household and Silas's late mother, Isabella Thornton. The older woman had been kind and generous, devoted to rescuing animals and supporting local charities. She had died of cancer 5 years ago, and according to Mrs. Vega, Silas had never fully recovered from the loss. "He locked away everything that reminded him of her," Mrs. Vega said one afternoon while Natalia helped arrange flowers in the main hall. The conservatory, the kennels, even his own capacity for joy. Mrs. Isabella would be heartbroken to see what her son has become. The words stayed with Natalia. She thought about the man who slept each night just meters away from where she lay on the floor, close enough to hear his breathing, yet separated by an ocean of pain and mistrust. She thought about the glimpse of vulnerability she had seen when Camila appeared, the crack in his armor that revealed the wounded heart beneath. 3 weeks after the gala, everything changed. Natalia received a frantic call from her mother at 2 in the morning. Javier had suffered a severe complication. His body was rejecting part of the treatment, and he had been rushed into emergency surgery. The doctors were not certain he would survive the night. Her mother was hysterical, her father silent with shock, and Natalia felt her world tilting on its axis. She threw on clothes with shaking hands, tears streaming down her face. She needed to get to the hospital immediately. Her family needed her. Javier needed her. She stumbled into the hallway, desperately searching for her phone to call a taxi, when she collided with something solid. Silas caught her by the shoulders, steadying her. He was wearing pajama pants and nothing else, his hair disheveled from sleep, concern etched across his features. It was the first time she had seen him look truly human. "What happened?" His voice was sharp but not unkind. "My brother," Natalia gasped between sobs. "He is in emergency surgery. I need to get to the hospital. I need to go now." For a moment, Silas simply looked at her, and something shifted in his expression. Without a word, he guided her toward the stairs. "Wait here," he commanded, then disappeared into his room. He emerged moments later wearing jeans and a shirt, car keys in hand. "I will drive you." Natalia was too distraught to question or refuse. They rushed to his car, a sleek black vehicle that roared to life beneath his hands. He drove with focused intensity, his jaw set, glancing occasionally at Natalia as she wept silently in the passenger seat. They arrived at the hospital in record time. Natalia bolted from the car before it fully stopped, racing through the emergency entrance. Silas followed close behind, his presence commanding immediate attention from the staff. When a nurse tried to restrict access to the surgical waiting area, Silas simply stated his name, and doors opened. Natalia found her parents in a small waiting room, her mother collapsed in her father's arms, both of them looking decades older than they had at the wedding. When they saw Natalia, her mother rushed forward, and they clung to each other, sharing their terror and helplessness. Silas stood apart, observing the scene with an unreadable expression. Then he quietly approached the nurse's station and began making calls. Within 20 minutes, the hospital's chief surgeon arrived personally to oversee Javier's care. Additional specialists were consulted. The best equipment was made available. Money, Natalia realized with a mixture of gratitude and bitterness, could move mountains even at 3 in the morning. The surgery lasted 6 agonizing hours. Silas remained the entire time, sitting in a corner of the waiting room, occasionally working on his phone but never leaving. He ordered food for Natalia's parents, ensured they had coffee, and spoke quietly with doctors as they provided updates. He was efficient, commanding, and unexpectedly compassionate. When the lead surgeon finally emerged, exhausted but smiling, announcing that Javier had survived and was stable, Natalia's mother collapsed to her knees in prayer. Her father wept openly. Natalia felt her legs give out, and suddenly Silas was there, his arms around her, holding her up as relief and exhaustion overwhelmed her. She sobbed against his chest, and for the first time since their wedding night, he touched her with gentleness. His hand moved in slow circles on her back, his other arm held her securely, and he murmured softly, "He is safe now. You can breathe." Later, after Natalia had seen Javier, pale but alive in his hospital bed, and after her parents had been settled in a nearby hotel that Silas insisted on providing, he drove her back to the mansion. Dawn was breaking over the ocean, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Natalia was emotionally drained, her eyes swollen from crying, her body exhausted. As they pulled into the estate, she turned to Silas. "Thank you," she whispered. "For everything you did tonight. You did not have to help like that." Silas's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Your brother is the reason you married me. His survival protects my investment." But his voice lacked its usual coldness, and the excuse rang hollow. "No," Natalia said softly. "What you did tonight went far beyond protecting an investment. You were kind. You were human. Why do you work so hard to hide that part of yourself?" Silas turned to look at her, and in the dawn light, she saw exhaustion and conflict warring in his features. "Because kindness is weakness. Caring makes you vulnerable. And vulnerable people get destroyed. Or vulnerable people get to truly live," Natalia countered. "You exist, Silas, but you do not live. You have built yourself a fortress, but fortresses are just beautiful prisons." He looked away, his jaw clenched. They sat in silence for a long moment before he finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "Her name was Camila. We were engaged. I loved her more than I believed possible to love another person. She betrayed me for money, for status, for a man who could give her more than I could at the time. When I confronted her, she laughed. She told me love was for children, that only fools believed in it. She said I was nothing but a means to an end." Natalia's heart ached at the raw pain in his voice. "So you decided everyone was like her?" "Everyone is like her," Silas said bitterly. "You married me for money. She stayed with her husband for money. People are predictable and selfish. Love is just a pretty word for transaction." "I married you to save my brother's life," Natalia said firmly. "Not for wealth or status or personal gain. I sacrificed my happiness for someone I love. That is not the same as what she did to you, and you know it." Silas turned to her sharply. "Is it not? You still sold yourself." "Yes," Natalia admitted, her voice breaking. "I did. And every day in your house, sleeping on your floor, being treated like I am worthless, I pay the price for that choice. But I would make the same choice again because true love means sacrifice. It means putting someone else's well-being above your own happiness. Something Camila clearly never understood and something you have forgotten is even possible." Her words hung in the air between them, heavy with truth. Silas stared at her as if seeing her for the first time, truly seeing her, not as the purchased bride or the symbol of betrayal, but as a woman who had given up everything for love. "I have treated you terribly," he said finally, his voice rough with suppressed emotion. "Yes," Natalia agreed. "You have. I wanted to punish you for her sins. I wanted to prove to myself that my cynicism was justified, that you were no different from her." He ran a hand through his hair, frustration and shame warring across his features. "But you are different. You have been different from the beginning, and I refuse to see it because seeing it would mean admitting I was wrong. That I have been cruel to an innocent woman. That I have become exactly the kind of person I despised." Natalia felt tears prickling her eyes again. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because watching you tonight with your family, seeing the love you have for your brother, the sacrifice you made for him, the genuine gratitude in your eyes despite everything I have done to you." He paused, struggling with words that clearly did not come easily. "It broke something inside me. Or maybe it fixed something. I do not know anymore." They went inside as the sun fully rose, the mansion bathed in golden light. But instead of parting ways as usual, Silas followed Natalia upstairs. At the door to the master bedroom, he stopped. "You will not sleep on the floor anymore," he said quietly. "There are 20 guest rooms in this house. Choose any one you like. Have Mrs. Vega prepare it however you wish. You deserve at least that much dignity." It was not an apology, not exactly, but it was an acknowledgement. A crack in the ice that had encased his heart for so long. Natalia nodded, too exhausted and emotionally overwhelmed to respond. Over the following weeks, something unprecedented happened. Silas began coming home earlier. He started joining Natalia for dinner, and though their conversations were initially stilted and awkward, they gradually found common ground. He asked about her work with the dogs and actually listened when she answered. She asked about his business, and he explained with surprising patience. One afternoon, Natalia was in the conservatory, now fully restored to its former glory, when Silas appeared in the doorway. He stood there silently, looking around at the thriving plants, the organized space, the beauty she had created from neglect. "My mother would have loved what you have done here," he said softly. "She always believed that anything could be brought back to life with enough care and patience." "Even people?" Natalia asked gently. Silas met her eyes, and for once, he did not look away. "I am beginning to think so." He began spending time in the conservatory with her, at first just watching, then helping with small tasks. They talked about his mother, and Silas shared memories he had locked away for years. Isabella Thornton had been warm and loving, devoted to her son but also fiercely independent. She had taught him that true strength included gentleness, that power without compassion was tyranny. "I forgot her lessons after she died," Silas admitted one evening as they worked side by side repotting orchids. "I was so angry at the world for taking her, and then Camila's betrayal came right after, and I just shut down everything she taught me about being human." "She would forgive you," Natalia said softly. "And she would want you to forgive yourself." Their hands brushed as they reached for the same tool, and neither pulled away. The touch was electric, sending warmth through Natalia's entire body. Silas looked at their hands, then up at her face, and something in his eyes had transformed from ice to fire. The shift in their relationship accelerated after that. Silas began finding excuses to be near her. He started touching her casually, a hand at her back, fingers brushing hers, adjustments to her hair when a strand fell across her face. Each touch lingered a little longer than necessary, each glance held a little more heat. Natalia felt herself responding despite her better judgment. She had promised herself she would not develop feelings for this man who had hurt her so deeply. But the Silas emerging from behind the walls was different. He was thoughtful and surprisingly funny when he allowed himself to be. He was brilliant but also capable of admitting when he was wrong. He was still learning how to be vulnerable, but he was trying, and that effort meant everything. The breaking point came on a stormy afternoon 6 weeks after Javier's surgery. Natalia was in the kennels when one of the support beams, weakened by age and weather, suddenly cracked. She managed to get the dogs out safely, but as she turned to leave, the entire structure began collapsing. A heavy beam struck her shoulder, knocking her down, and debris rained around her. She heard Silas shouting her name, and then he was there, lifting the beam off her with strength born of desperation. He carried her out of the collapsing building, cradling her against his chest as rain poured down on them both. His face was white with fear, his hands shaking as he examined her injuries. "Are you insane?" he shouted, but his voice cracked with emotion. "You could have been killed. Do you have any idea what that would have done to me?" Natalia looked up at him, rain and tears mingling on her face. "Would it have mattered?" "Of course it would have mattered," Silas said fiercely, his gray eyes blazing. "It would have destroyed me. Do you not understand? I cannot lose you. Not now. Not ever." The admission hung between them, more powerful than any declaration of love could have been. Silas gathered her closer, his lips finding her forehead, her cheeks, her eyelids, soft kisses that spoke of desperation and relief and something deeper he could not yet name. "I am falling in love with you," he whispered against her wet hair. "I fought it. I tried to convince myself it was impossible. But watching you nearly die just now made me realize that I would rather face every fear, risk every pain, than spend another day pretending I do not care." Natalia's breath caught. "You humiliated me. You made me sleep on the floor. You said I disgusted you." "I know," Silas said, his voice rough with shame and regret. "And I will spend the rest of my life making amends for that cruelty if you let me. I was wrong about everything. About love, about you, about what it means to be strong. You are the strongest person I have ever known, and I have been a coward hiding behind my wealth and my bitterness." He pulled back to look at her face, his hands gentle as they brushed wet hair from her eyes. "I do not deserve your forgiveness. I do not deserve another chance. But I am asking anyway because the alternative, a life without you, without your laughter and your kindness and your incredible strength, is not a life worth living." Natalia studied his face, seeing the vulnerability there, the genuine remorse, the desperate hope. She thought about the journey they had traveled, from that horrific wedding night to this moment in the rain. She thought about the man he had been and the man he was becoming. "I do not forgive you yet," she said honestly, and watched pain flash across his features. "But I think I could learn to. I think we could learn to build something real together if you are truly willing to try." Relief and joy transformed Silas's face. "I will spend every day proving I am worthy of that chance. I swear it." He kissed her then, not the cold, brief kiss of their wedding day, but a kiss filled with passion and promise and the beginning of something neither had believed possible. The rain poured down around them, washing away the past, baptizing them into a new beginning. The doctor confirmed that Natalia had escaped with only bruises and a mild sprain. Silas refused to leave her side, personally tending to her needs with a gentleness that made Mrs. Vega smile knowingly. That night, when Natalia retired to her guest room, Silas appeared at her door. "May I stay?" he asked hesitantly. "Just to hold you. To know you are safe. Nothing more unless you want it." Natalia nodded, and for the first time since their wedding, they shared a bed. Silas held her carefully, mindful of her bruises, his arms creating a shelter of warmth and safety. They talked deep into the night about everything, their pasts, their fears, their hopes for a future neither had dared imagine. "I want to marry you again," Silas said as dawn approached. "Properly this time. Not as a transaction but as a choice. Not because of debts or obligations, but because I cannot imagine my life without you in it." "We are already married," Natalia pointed out with a small smile. "Then let us renew our vows. Let us make new promises that mean something. Let me stand before everyone we know and tell them that you are not my purchased bride but my chosen partner, my equal, my love." Tears slipped down Natalia's cheeks, but these were tears of joy. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I would like that very much." The renewal ceremony took place 3 months later in the restored conservatory, surrounded by flowers and the people who truly mattered. Javier, now in remission and gaining strength daily, walked Natalia down the aisle this time. Her parents wept with happiness. Mrs. Vega beamed from the front row. The 3 dogs sat obediently nearby, their tails wagging. But the most important difference was Silas himself. When Natalia reached him, he was crying openly, unashamed of his emotions. When he spoke his vows, his voice shook with sincerity. "Natalia, I was lost in darkness, convinced that love was a lie and trust was for fools. You came into my life, and even when I tried to break you, you remained whole. You showed me that true strength is not in walls but in vulnerability. That real courage is not in isolation but in connection. I vow to spend every day proving worthy of your love. I vow to honor the sacrifice you made and the grace you have shown. I vow to be the man you see when you look at me with those kind eyes, even when I cannot see it myself." Natalia's vows were equally heartfelt. "Silas, you gave me a prison but I found freedom. You gave me contempt but I found purpose. You gave me loneliness but I found myself. And in finding myself, I discovered you, the real you beneath the armor. I vow to continue seeing that man. I vow to challenge you when you retreat behind your walls. I vow to love you not despite your scars but because of them, because they are part of the journey that brought you to me." When they kissed this time, it was a kiss of genuine love, of partnership, of 2 wounded souls who had found healing in each other. The small gathering erupted in applause, and for the first time in years, the Thornton mansion echoed with joy instead of silence. 1 year later, Natalia stood in that same conservatory, now expanded into a full rescue center for animals. She had used Silas's resources to create something beautiful, a sanctuary where abandoned and abused animals could find safety and love. She worked there daily, her veterinary skills finally put to full use, while Silas had restructured his business priorities to spend more time at home. Their marriage was not perfect. They still argued, still struggled sometimes with trust and vulnerability. But they faced challenges together now, as partners who had chosen each other not once but twice. Silas approached her from behind, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. "Happy anniversary, Mrs. Thornton." "Both anniversaries." Natalia leaned back against him, feeling safe and loved in a way she had once thought impossible. "Happy anniversary. Which one are we celebrating?" "Both," Silas said, turning her in his arms to face him. "The day I forced you into this marriage and proved myself a fool, and the day you gave me another chance and proved yourself an angel." "I am no angel," Natalia protested with a laugh. "You are to me," Silas insisted, his gray eyes warm with love. "You took a man made of ice and taught him how to feel again. You turned a prison into a home. You transformed a transaction into true love. If that is not miraculous, I do not know what is." He kissed her softly, and in that kiss was everything they had overcome, everything they had built, and everything yet to come. The ruthless millionaire who had bought a bride on their wedding night had become a man who cherished his wife. The sacrificial bride who had slept on the floor had become a woman who knew her worth and demanded respect. Together, they had proven that even the coldest hearts could thaw, that even the deepest wounds could heal, and that love, real love built on respect and choice rather than obligation, was worth every sacrifice, every struggle, every moment of pain that had brought them to this place of peace. As the sun set over the ocean, painting the sky in shades of fire and gold, Silas and Natalia stood in their conservatory surrounded by life they had nurtured together, proof that with patience, courage, and genuine care, anything could be brought back from the edge of destruction and taught to bloom again.